Hello, dear ones. I am so happy to be here with Dr. Daryl Turner. Now, he's known worldwide because he's a worldwide man as Dr. T. And as part of this hormone conference, we have been addressing different aspects of the body and how hormones really affect that body when they're imbalanced. And I am so happy, Dr. Turner, to have you here because you're a medical researcher. You are a world lecturer. You're on the scientific board of India just to show, how worldwide you are. You're actually from Australia, and we're now talking with you in Australia. It's 9 a.m. in the morning, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and you've created clinical trials, new inventions, solutions for medical problems, and really, you are a huge expertise and have a huge body of knowledge with the thyroid gland and the adrenal stress glands. So, I'm really interested to know. First of all, I want to welcome you, really welcome you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Dr. Hall.
for your time. And how did you initially get involved with the thyroid gland? Because you've done groundbreaking work with thyroid. How did you get involved in this and interested initially?
Well, we had a lot of patients coming into our clinic who would come in with symptoms. And of course, we would run the blood tests, and the blood tests didn't match up with their symptoms. So they come in sick, and we send them out sick. We couldn't treat them because the blood test told us, it's a TSH, told us that they were subclinical, and that's a term that we created to park these patients who had the symptoms, who weren't well, but we wouldn't treat them because the TSH was in the normal range. So we got talking about it, and myself and another doctor friend, I says, look, why don't we try and approach thyroid from a different perspective? This blood work and the patient's symptoms are not working. And by the way, most doctors do not ask the patients their symptoms. They just look at the TSH and they say, go home. So we decided to write a list of all of the ways that we could test thyroid, from basal body temperature to resting metabolic rate, and all they're all different, and reflexes. And then we decided to experiment, and then we built a machine, and we did quite a bit of research, and we found a way to start to measure how a patient's reflexes and neurotransmitter speeds related to their symptoms, and we found it correlated very, very well.
Yeah, I think that, in my clinical practice with mainly women, but also with men, I am astonished by how often patients come to me and they say, well, I know my thyroid is low. My blood work is normal. I've been to see 3 other doctors and nobody will treat me. And, so when I met you and we're going to talk all about your ThyroFlex machine, and I met you and you started really teaching me these nuances about a discrepancy between what the blood work says and what's actually happening in the body. It was really a game changer for me, Dr. Turner, just really important. So let's just, the thyroid gland is right here. It's a big endocrine gland. Can you talk to, our viewers about some of the important symptoms that they could, if they have them, that might mean that they have low thyroid?
Yes, in fact, your thyroid gland is just underneath my tie. There's a thyroid cartilage above the thyroid gland, and then it's like a little heart shape thing that wraps around your thyroid cartilage, and it's just above the clavicles here, and the top of the sternum here, right here. Yep, you're onto it, and if the thyroid starts to go haywire, the thyroid starts to enlarge, and we can feel that with our fingers. We can feel if it's slightly enlarged. We can feel this is after you felt a few thyroids. If it's got little lumps on it, and we know that there is a problem. But the thyroid is like the central railway station, like Grand Central Station, to all your body functions. Even though it's very, very small, it controls the quality of your life.
Mm.
If your thyroid starts to deteriorate and it's not balanced, that means that the core hormones in and around the thyroid are not balanced. Your life, your quality of life deteriorates year after year after year. In fact, according to Broder Barnes and Terry Hertog, the #1 and #2 thyroid specialists in the world, they postulated in their books that 80% of everyone in the world has a thyroid disorder. And that is what you started to find once you started to test, that it was like 80% of your patients, and this is what we found with all the machines that we have around the world, that 80% of the patients do have a thyroid disorder. So we confirm their hypothesis.
Absolutely. So, it is the engine of the body. So it runs our metabolism, it gives us energy. And what happens when the gland starts to fail? I mean, I know we're tired. What else could you tell our listeners about symptoms of
Sure.
low thyroid?
Well, the main symptoms is that you have low basal temperature.
Mhm.
That means your hands are cold, your feet are cold, the tip of your nose is cold. That's to start with. The outer third of your eyebrows disappear. You start to get hair loss in the crowns. You get puffiness underneath your eyes. And you start to put on weight because thyroid controls your resting metabolic rate. It controls how many calories you're burning today. So you put on weight between your middle section it's called the spare tires, 1, 2, or 3. Even though you're slim, you can quite often have a spare tire if you have your reflexes are slow. Your thyroid controls your heartbeat, so that means that's the largest muscle in your body. If you are low thyroid, low heartbeat. If your thyroid is hyper, that means that you have a fast heartbeat. But guess what? All your blood tests, it doesn't matter if it's T3, free T3, T4, free T4, T3U, T4, T7, or TSH, they all appear to be normal.
Right. Right. So that is the mask. That's the great masquerade. Also, I would say, just as you were talking there, I was thinking about, all the women that tell me they're bloated, the digestion doesn't work. We get constipated. Our skin is dry. I mean, it's just, Dr. Turner, it's a mess when the thyroid gland goes out, and it is heartbreaking when nobody can fix it. So,
Yes.
yeah. It is. I see you were saying.
When they have digestive problems, that means that the thyroid is more than hyper or hypo. As soon as I hear that they have digestive problems or bloating, I know, because thyroid controls the estrogen and the progesterone, I know that they are possibly heading towards an autoimmune disorder, either Hashimoto's, Graves, or Hashimoto's, and that's a definitive indicator.
Oh, that is right. And we're going to talk about that connection between estrogen and progesterone, thyroid, in just a minute. So why does the gland become imbalanced? And we just heard the medical medium. He's saying viruses are so important. And, he went into a lot of stuff. But what is your understanding of some of the things that cause, thyroid imbalances and disease?
Sure. In fact, at the turn of the century in 1900, only 30% of the people, not 80, that's 1900 until now, had a thyroid disorder. Why? Because it controls your estrogen and your progesterone, and it's difficult for you to conceive for a female, of course. Difficult to conceive. If you do, it's very hard for the fetus to stick in the first trimester. You're likely to have 1, 2, or 3 miscarriages, which are quite devastating on not only you, but as a couple. And it's also a lot more difficult to carry the full term. And until the humidicribs were invented, for if you had a premature baby, it was very difficult for it to survive. So it is actually hereditary. So the vast majority of thyroid is hereditary. There are other things that can trigger it that we can cover shortly. But it is as soon as the baby's born, and you were an OBGYN, You delivered many, many
Absolutely.
babies.
Babies, and I had 3 miscarriages. I now have 3 beautiful children, with 3 miscarriages because I was hypothyroid. My thyroid was low.
Absolutely. And I hear this all the time. But as soon as a baby's born, you do a heel kick, because you're looking at the speed of the reflexes, you judge it, or a heel prick. Because as soon as a baby's born, that thyroid has to be right. And of course, the heel prick is the blood test that may not show up whether the baby needs thyroid or not. If they need thyroid, you've got to give the thyroid immediately. Is that correct?
If not, they really have severe mental incapacity. So thyroid is very
Yes.
important for the brain and the brain function. Yeah, so genetics is a real, I mean, that is a very important cause. And, you know, I think about stress. Do you think that fewer people in 1930 had thyroid disorders because there was less toxicity back then? Because that's a cause.
Yes.
Is that a cause too?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The toxicity in today's environment was nothing like it was in 1900. I mean, we didn't have all the cars belching or the pollution to the air. We didn't have mass food production. There's a whole lot of reasons why. That's from the toxins, plus a lot of the nutrients we used to get in our fruit, vegetables, meats, fish have disappeared because of mass production and cropping, 2 or 3 times a year on the same fields.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, it's just, life has just really become very, very difficult. I know that, you know, you're such a big proponent of iodine, and when we lose our iodine, the thyroid can become imbalanced. Can you talk a little bit, Dr. T, about the importance of iodine in thyroid? Is a, you know?
Sure. But just on the stress, there are 2 axes, and I know we're going to cover this in a minute, but there's a thing called a HPA axis and the HPT axis. One, of course, the T stands for thyroid, the A stands for adrenal, and the stress impacts the thyroid at 3 different levels. If you have a lot of stress, you're impacted at all 3 levels. So when you treat the patient, you got to treat those 3 levels, not just the one level. So coming back to iodine, iodine is an essential nutrient, or it is an element. And there's a combination of iodine that was discovered by Dr. Lugels back in 1836. He found the right combination to give a patient. You need iodine to convert a thing called T4 into T3 and free it up for intercellular use, called free T3. The body cannot use TSH, you cannot use T3, and it cannot use T4. The only thing that it can use is free T3 and a little bit of free T4. And so the T4 has 4 ions on it, and then the iodine knocks one of the ions off and releases it for intercellular use. Of course, you've got to have the D3K2 to open up the receptor pathways for it to get into the mitochondria. But iodine is an amazing thing. I mean, when you were young, if you see a cut or a scratch on you, your mother used to put this yellow stuff on. That was iodine. It's like a disinfectant to the whole body. If you get bitten by a snake, you take iodine. If you get food poisoning while you're traveling, you take iodine, and it kills everything. I mean, it's a purifier, both internally. So when we give you iodine in a capsule form, it gets into the we transport it into the mitochondria, but externally, of course, it kills all the germs on you if you get cut, brash, scraped, or whatever.
Yeah. So, you know, iodine, the dose would be something like, you know, I know you need iodine and iodide.
Yes.
I know that your company, you know, you make a very, very good iodine solution, but it's about 12, 13, you know,
Yes.
maybe.
Yeah. So the Japanese, who have very, very low incidences of breast cancer, and I'll just cover that in a minute. Breast cancer, uterine cancer, and ovarian cancer, and prostate enlargement take an average of 13.8 milligrams per day. We, according to the very famous researchers, Fleischer et al., they discovered that the ideal maintenance dose and their lifetime of work on iodine is 12.5 milligrams, 6.25 for children, 12.5. But we also give 50 milligrams for if you have anything to do with your breast, that is hot spots in your breast lumps. It's the main surveillance system and the main system of diminishing or taking away any lumps and bumps from your thyroid, anything to do with your breast, any thickening of the uterine lining. So the endometriosis is because of lack of iodine, and we can reverse that. And of course, cysts on your ovaries.
That is such a wonderful intervention for so many women when they have the fibroids and endometriosis and ovarian cyst, and of course, to make their thyroid work better. So,
Yes.
Daryl, you
Oh,
touched.
and for men, prostate enlargement.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about T4 going to T3, T4 is what the thyroid gland makes, and in the
Yes.
comes T3. So listen, this is all a lot of science, but very, very important for people to understand. So when you talk about thyroid, you were mentioning the hypothyroid, the hyperthyroid, and then, the Hashimoto's and kind of the mixed hyper types. And you make that diagnosis by symptoms and by blood work and by the reflexes. Is that right?
Yes, so we developed a symptom sheet where we can tell from the symptom sheet, because there are certain symptoms associated with autoimmune. So I mean the basic symptoms of as I was discussing before of being hypothyroid. I'll start with hypo first, is cold extremities, because your body is always in an emergency state trying to keep you warm, especially, and it plays a major effect on your brain. If your thyroid is not right, because your body's in emergency the whole time. But there's a whole lot of symptoms: unsteady gait, you bump into things easily, and there's a whole and depression, mood changes. There's a whole lot of symptoms that are fairly easy to identify hypothyroidism with. Hyper, of course, you get the rapid heartbeat or the skipping of the heartbeat. And you get a little bit of shakiness, you get increased sweating, and you get brittle nails. That's a sign of hyperthyroidism. So on our symptoms survey, you show the symptoms. If you have a combination of those symptoms, in other words, you should be in one camp or the other, or none. If you're euthyroid, that means your thyroid is normal. You won't have any symptoms. But if you're hypo, you're in the hypo camp. If you're hyper, you're in the hyper camp. And if you have a combination of both, then that's the problem. We picked them up in the questionnaire, and that triggers a blood test because we suspect that your Hashimoto's or Graves', which is the autoimmune side of it, or even worse still, a combination of Graves' and Hashimoto's called hashitoxicosis.
Well, that's very good that the symptoms help. Now, what about in terms of diagnosis, your really innovative ThyroFlex machine? Because this has changed the way that I've been able to manage thyroid more effectively.
Well, according to Sir Dr. Richard Bayless, the head of the Endocrinology Society in Europe, he stated at a meeting a few years ago that none, N-O-N-E, and he was very, very specific about this, and he said the word none of the blood tests are valid. As simple as straight as that. You cannot diagnose a patient with blood tests. So he went on to say the only valid thing are reflexes, called a deep tendon reflex, to be technical, and symptoms.
Okay.
We have a thing called a ThyroFlex machine that tests those things. We test the deep tendon reflex. We test the neurotransmitter speed, because don't forget that thyroid plays havoc on your brain. Your brain slows down quite substantially, and we measure that. And we measure how many calories per day that you're burning with a simple test. And we combine that with your symptoms from your symptom sheet, and we get a something that's 98.5% accurate. We know it's 98.5% accurate because we did clinical trials over 3 years on 2,200 people, and we tracked them and we traced them, and we know that it's very, very accurate. So for us to identify a patient with hypothyroidism is very straightforward. A simple 4-minute test. We combine it with the symptoms, and you know how much thyroid to give the patient.
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. I've done, I don't know, thousands of tests, but basically it's a little computer that you give
Yes.
the doctor. And when they do the test, it just, you just are measuring the speed of the reflexes. Like you said, all the other things too, but it is a wonderful, wonderful medical device, Dr. Turner. And I know that you
Thank
really
you.
heart into this, really you put your heart into this. So I think all doctors who are dealing with thyroid problems and endocrinologists, my God, need this. And I know that around the world, this is becoming, much more sought after and accepted and, as a real standard of care. So I'm so happy about that.
Yes.
Yeah. So congratulations on that. Now, so we've diagnosed the patient. Let's say they have low thyroid, they're hypothyroid. How do we treat them? Because, in the United States, endocrinologists give Synthroid. That's T4.
Okay. We actually, in our clinical trials, and this is how which we'll talk about later, how we stumbled upon how to put Hashimoto's into remission and how to cure it totally. But in our clinical trials, we actually tried out all the different types of thyroid available to us: compounded ones, compounded T3, T4, synthetic T4. And then we also tried natural bioidentical T1, T2, T3, T4, and T7, derived from either pig or cow, called bovine or porcine. And what we found is that you initially got a bang for your buck, as they say in America, when you use a synthetic T4, but it starts here and then it declines, and so your doctor will increase it and then it declines. It's like a seesaw. You go, for the rest of your life, you're going up and down, up and down, up and down, and it keeps on increasing the dose and increasing the dose. Why? Because your body does not like synthetic. Number one is T4 only, which the body cannot use unless you give them iodine and D3K2. Doctors do not give you iodine and D3K2 to make it work. And then we found that the ones that we gave the synthetic to, the compounded to, which is compounded T3, T4, well, they are both synthetic. It worked a little bit better, but it still didn't hold the patient. The body does not like synthetic. And then we found over 3 years that we got the best performance, constant, and we're able to hold the patients so perfectly for years and years and years with the natural bioidentical. So we decided that our choice for straightforward hypothyroidism is different for the autoimmune, but for straightforward hypothyroidism, which 80% of everyone has, is natural bioidentical thyroid combined with iodine and D3. I like to make one other statement, and I want you to think of a car engine, right? If you have a car, you need petrol or gasoline, you need oil, and you need water, right? You can drive a car for a while without oil and water, which is the D3K2 and the iodine. And of course, the thyroid is your fuel. That's your gasoline. So to make your engine work properly, right, without it seizing up, you need all three in the right combinations. So that is why the system that I developed works so smoothly, like a smooth car engine, because we make sure that everyone has all three, so that you're firing on all pistons.
Yeah, Dr. Turner, this is absolutely brilliant. Now, I've been looking at my phone because people are sending me all of these messages. And I'd just like to read one from Olivia Downey is saying, Dr. Turner and the Thyroflex saved my life, took me from bedridden to the epitome of health, could not recommend to him or the test enough. Not one person on earth whom shouldn't be tested. Oh, thank you.
Oh,
Very
thank you. Thank
beautiful.
you, Livia.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I think that sums it up with in terms of how wonderful the
Yeah.
machine is. Absolutely.
I actually take great pleasure in helping people. I take great pleasure in my body of work being able to affect people for the rest of their lives. I mean, you've got to be on this medication for the rest of your life. It is hereditary. You're born with a shortage of thyroid hormones, and you have to supplement. Does exercise, diet, herbs and spices will not replace the missing hormones. You got to replace the missing hormones with hormones. And you got to give it the oil and water, which is the iodine and the D3K2, to make that medication work, perform to its optimum. And I know that the hundreds of thousands of patients that we treat a year worldwide, we're in 27 different countries, that we have a major impact on the quality of their life. You put a
Absolutely.
smile on their face.
Yeah, I'm smiling. I'm smiling.
Yeah,
Dr.
because yeah.
Yeah, this is so important. And endocrinologists in the United States do not talk about the reverse T3. And yet that can be one of the problems where the T3 is bound up and can't be used. It's in the
Yes.
in active form. So can you speak a little bit about that? What do we do about that? Who should we measure it on all people or what do we do? It's
Okay.
yeah.
We have so on our symptoms survey, if you score a certain score on our symptom survey, around about 12 or 13, that automatically triggers a thing called a reverse T3 test. Reverse T3 is a T4 problem. The T4 is building up, but the body cannot access it. It is dangerous to have too high a T4, especially if you give a patient more thyroid because the thyroid's not working, and that is a danger to the patient. Why do you get reverse T3? You get reverse T3, 98% of all reverse T3 is caused by stress. And once again, I mentioned the HPA and the HPT axis, right? Because the hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid works side by side.
Yeah.
So the hypothalamus can inhibit, the pituitary can inhibit, and the adrenal can inhibit the actions of the thyroid. So what happens is that you have two types of cortisol. I won't go into too many details here, but they both combine together and they inhibit the conversion of T4, that's called a deionase, into a usable form called free T3, and it keeps on building up. Why? Because your stress is too great. If you don't treat the T3, which is fairly simple with our methods to treat and fairly fast, you end up with Addison's or Cushing's disease, which is basically too little, or is like hyper or hypo adrenal failure. In other words, you don't have any you have either too much cortisol or not enough cortisol to work with. Most people don't have enough. So if they don't have enough, we can do you start to form a hump on the back of your neck. Yeah. So it's a little fatty hump and that we can feel. That is the start of Cushing's and Addison's. And we can do a saliva test and a reverse T3 test. So we collect the saliva over 4 times in one day. You spit into a little tube, and that gives us a graph. And we see that there should be a nice bump, and there should be a reserve called fight or flight reserve at the end of the day before you go to sleep. Well, quite often what we find people who have RT3 is they start halfway up the curve. So instead of being up here, they're up here, and they come down, and between 2 and 4 p.m. they call flatlining. They're totally flatlined. They have no cortisol left. Well, that is reverse. That is what triggers reverse T3. It is stress.
So helpful. Yeah, so the way, just looking at this a little bit, stepping back, you differ from traditional endocrinologists because first of all, you treat with, all the full component of thyroid, T2, 3, 4, 7, you really treat with all of that, not just the T4, which endocrinologists will do. You don't rely only on blood tests because they're not that accurate. I guess 40% of the time or 50% of the time, they're not really accurate. And then we don't diagnose the disease. So you look at probably the blood work, but you don't make your final diagnosis on that. You use the thyroplex, the reflexes, the symptom questionnaire. And then also you look at this reverse T3. Endocrinologists in the United States, I don't know, some of them probably do look at the reverse T3, but I was asking a very renowned endocrinologist in the United States about the reverse T3, and he said, no, it doesn't. So you really differ in dramatic ways, and this is why people continue to suffer from their thyroid disease. So you're saving
Yes.
a lot of lives here, Dr. T. You're saving a lot of
Yeah.
lives.
Unfortunately, I've had the experience of losing a couple of patients overseas because their doctors continued to give them their thyroid, and they died because of reverse T3. So I never want to go through that shock again. And because they just kept on, they take more synthetic T4, and the T4 keeps on building up until they until they kill the patient. So it's not a happy ending. The reverse T3 is very, very easy for us to treat. It takes us 30 days, but because the patient has got with stress, we have to modify their stress response.
Mhm.
In other words, the patient's got to do some of the work themselves, so we can do treatment. For instance, our adrenal, um, uh, the adrenal that we give them has the hypothalamus in it. It has the hormones from the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal cortex. And there's a thing called ACTH that communicates between the adrenal and the hypothalamus. Sorry, and the pituitary, and so that holds the patient, but the patient has to change the way that that they are interpreting the incoming stressors. And I'll give you a little example. We're both driving along in a car in Los Angeles, and this happens quite often, and some idiot pulls out from the carpool lane over the double lines and slams right in front of you, puts his brakes on, right? And you have to brake hard. I could be driving, or you could be driving, right? I may put my fists out and shake and scream and call him an idiot and toot my horn, and you say, just let him go, and you don't worry about it, right? It's the same stressor, but two people handle it totally differently. The problem is, if I put my fist up and I have a reaction, it turns my adrenal system on. I'm adrenally exhausted anyhow. I'm actually pulling on blood sugars and lipids, and that's pushing me towards diabetes and heart disease because my lipids got nowhere to go. They go into my arterial walls, and of course the blood sugar has got, I can't use it. I'm sitting in a car. I'm not running and exercising it off. Not only that, when I go home, I tell my wife and I tell my friends about this idiot who put in front of me. And every time I do that, I trigger the same stress response again. And it's the way that you handle stress. It's better. So you got to reprogram your brain. You've been handling stress for many years the wrong way. You got to reprogram your brain through meditation or mind work or reading a special book on how to handle stress in a different method. So what we tell our patients is we're going to take your reverse T3 away. We're going to put you onto this adrenal support that we don't want to keep you on for too long. We can only keep you on for a maximum of 12 months while we fill up the reserves of the cortisol, which are now on empty, and we've got to slowly fill the cup back up to the top, which takes 6 to 12 months. But we want you to do something for yourself, and we give them a sheet on mental exercises and things that they can do, similar to meditation, to calm themselves down and to start looking at the stressors that we have in everyday life. I don't care if it's breathing in the air from Los Angeles and the smog, or driving on the roads, or interacting with your family, or anything else like that. You got to look at them in a different way.
So this is so helpful because our stress glands basically save our life every day. And, adrenal stress is one of your big specialties too. And the adrenal glands, they're
Yes.
right on the kidneys, above the kidneys. And they modulate our stress, right? Big stress, big outputs of adrenal hormones. And so
Yes.
saying about this is how when we're anxious and stressed and our hormones are pouring out, how it affects the thyroid is really important. What else is affected when we're stressed and we're pouring out those hormones? What else starts to happen with the body, Dr. Turner?
Well, there's things that you don't realize that can trigger stress that you don't realize. I mean, allergies, right? Infections, acute. Some of the prescription drugs, if you get wounded, they all affect your cortisol. What about coffee? You know, or caffeine or sugar, white flour. I mean, you don't think of these things. They are stresses on the body. Being negative, having fear in your body, emotional stress, right? Marital stress. That's quite a big one. Unemployment, death of a love, death of someone who's close to you. The other one right now, of course, is financial pressures and fear about this COVID, right? And then there's smoking, there's lack of exercise, there's all the toxins, lack of we're not getting enough relaxation. There's poor eating habits. They all have a major impact on your adrenals, and your adrenals, as you said, sit on top of your kidneys, and there's a thing called the adrenal medulla, and then there's the adrenal cortex. They both put out different types of hormones. I won't go through the hormones now because I've got big long words, but they communicate with a thing called ACTH, which is on our questionnaire. And we pick up ACTH when you get little patches of hair loss called alopecia. And then they come up and they interfere. Too much stress interferes with the thyroid hormone, with the T4. As I said, stress interferes with the at the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the thyroid, and the adrenal cortex. They have major impacts on each other.
Right. Yeah.
That means that if we balance your thyroid, we have to balance your adrenals. Otherwise, we can never ever get it right.
Yeah, we absolutely have to balance all the hormones that are abnormal. And those two, I learned kind of the hard way just when I started managing menopause, almost 3 decades ago now, that where I would try to give thyroid, but I didn't know much about the adrenals. I certainly wasn't taught about the adrenals in medical school. And then women would develop like palpitations and jitteriness. And I realized, oh, you have to really start correcting the adrenals before you do thyroid interventions. Now, that's just one of the things that I kind of learned. But what are the symptoms when your adrenals are high or when your adrenals are low? What are the symptoms so that our listeners can really say, I got that symptom. Maybe I have adrenal problems.
We divide it into 2 sections. One is symptoms, and one is we ask some questions about what you do. For instance, rapid heartbeat, as you just mentioned. When you get stressed, you can get rapid heartbeat that may not be associated with Hashimoto's. You feel stressed out all the time. You get confused. You're easily confused. And of course, one of the big ones is you can get digestive problems because the gut is very closely tied with the adrenals. You can have all the skin disorders from psoriasis to skin allergies to rashes. But if you wake up tired, right? If you wake up tired between 2 to 4 p.m., you feel like a pick-me-up snack, either salty, sugary, or caffeine or Coke or something like that. And if you fall asleep as soon as you go to bed, or you fall asleep before bedtime in front of the TV or writing a book, you are adrenally exhausted.
Oh,
That's because you flatline. That tells us that you're flatlining between 2 and 4 p.m.
and it really, other symptoms I would think would be depression and weight gain and panic could be, I guess, hyperthyroidism, but it could also be, lower thyroid. Do you think panic and anxiety is more hyperthyroid? I mean,
Well, there's a short-term stress response and there's a long-term stress response. So let's just do this short-term one. You can, if you're very good stress, if you really get stressed, what's your body doing? It's saying, I'm in an emergency, I want extra blood to my heart. So your breathing rate increases, your heart rate, your blood pressure increases, right? The glucose is broken down in a different way because you need that to your you need that glucose to your muscles to fight off the tiger or lion now. Your blood flow pattern changes, your resting metabolic rate change. So there's a whole lot of very short term, and if you're putting your body in and out of that all the time, that is a major problem down the road. If you do that 6 or 7 times a day, if you do it once a week, it's not a problem. If you're doing that 6 or 7 times a day, then you're leading yourself into a lot of long-term effects. And of course, one of the things that is, it can affect your kidneys by the retention of water. It increases your blood volume, so your blood pressure goes up, right? The protein and fats are broken down in a different way. And of course, you start to get glucose and resistance, which is not very, very good. And you get increased glucose in your blood, and that's not very good as well. And your immune system, with all the different things for you that your immune system does, gets compromised because your immune system is suppressed.
And really, we know now that when the adrenals are functioning at a low level, when there's a crash or where the adrenal glands are just so depleted that they can't make their hormones, then that's a core root cause. I mean, stress, which is the adrenal gland function, really root cause of dementia and heart disease and as you said, diabetes or high blood sugar, cancer. So the glands are extremely important to keep healthy, to replenish. And how do you treat them, Dr. Turner? You mentioned that you have a nice supplement that has probably DHA and pregnenolone and cortisol and things like that in it. And is that how you, and aside from all the lifestyle changes and the relaxation, is that what you do?
It was not RT3. It was just straight. If you score under 13, and it's not straight RT3 problem, we give the patient adrenal supplement with the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal cortex, and the adrenal medulla, along with a whole lot of other herbal supplements in that are essential to it and to the performance of the adrenals. And we keep them on that for a minimum of 6 months. The reason is that the adrenals are very slow to recover. If I give you thyroid, you can feel the effects in 7 to 14 days. It's very fast. The adrenals are very slow to recover. And then we reassess whether you need to, because we don't want to overtake the function of the adrenal gland. We only want to supplement it. You can't supplement it for too long. 1 year is maximum on our hormones. Don't forget, we're giving you adrenal hormones. So we reassess it after 6 months, and that's pretty easy to do. That's either with a saliva test or with a or plus C questionnaire, and then we see if it's built up enough. If it has built up enough, and then we will take you off it. And then the third part of that part of the treatment is changing the way you handle the incoming stressors that I explained just before.
Beautifully, beautifully. Dr. Turner, I see why you're such a sought after international speaker at these big, summits and in big conferences that we all go to. And you're really one of the stars there. And I so appreciative for this information and the delivery of it. And now I want to just change because we're coming to the end of our talk, but I just want to ask you, because we have vitality, we have the physical health, and then we have the reasons for it. So in terms of your life, what brings you joy? What counts for you in your life? Be a role model here for us.
Yeah. I have eliminated fear. In other words, I believe in myself. I mean, someone can induce fear into you. They pull a knife on you or gun on you, which has happened to me quite a few times. Or whether you're going to fall off a mountain and or you're in diving or you're in a plane, flying a plane, you're about to crash or something like that. I mean, that's real fear. But if you believe in yourself, you can do anything. I was born in New Zealand. I'm from a small island that was remote from everything that you can get. Born into a socialist society, a socialist government. I shouldn't have got anywhere. But I believed in myself. I took the chances of going to America. I took the chances of going around the world. And I took the chances of inventing and developing not only the Thyroflex test system, the thyroidine system for testing for the iodine, and the halides and the core hormone system for balancing the sleep, because we have to balance the sleep, the iodide, the adrenals, and the stress modulators, as well as the thyroid. So we have a complete system, and I believed in myself. I put my money where my mouth was, and I knew that I could help someone. I'm an adventurer. I love to go on adventures, and I love to go where you'd never catch me on a ship, on a cruise ship. I go where other tourists will not go. And every year I do incredible adventures, which actually I've discussed with you and your son Conrad a few times, and I write about them, and I'm keeping a whole record of all these incredible adventures, from crossing deserts to underwater diving, to shipwreck diving, to flying planes to where no one else flies them, and to volunteering. I do a lot of volunteering in the countries that other doctors refuse to go to, like Bangladesh, and we have charities in Fiji. We give, my wife and I give part of our income to every year, and so it's about being good, believe in yourself, and having experiences that you wouldn't get. So you don't want to waste your life. I haven't wasted a single day of my life. Every day is a new experience, but it doesn't just happen. You got to create them yourself.
Oh, Daryl, my son, when he first met you, he's like the tequila man. He's the most exciting man in the world. And you have fascinated audiences around the world with all of your adventures. And this has been a wonderful adventure for me, knowing you and learning from you, and now having you view, a very sophisticated audience that needed your sophistication to talk to. So really, from my heart, Dr. T, thank you. Really, thank you for clearing up this situation about the thyroid and adrenals.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I know that it works. I got confidence in it. I got confidence in my, because I was the one who discovered how to treat Hashimoto's, which my wife ended up with, of all people. And I never realized I'd have to use the Hashimoto's treatment on my own wife. But I can tell you that not only did it reverse it, she could hardly get out of bed. which is an Hashimoto's, is an autoimmune response. She could hardly get it out of bed. Her symptoms were through the roof. On a questionnaire, her symptoms were about 40, plus the hypo symptoms. And I used it, and not only did I reverse it, today she has 0 and 0, and you've actually done the blood tests. 0 antibodies, 0 a thing called TPOAB and a TGAB, 0 and 0. She's got no trace of it whatsoever. Not only did I treat up, clear up her Hashimoto's, it also clears up on our protocols the other cascade of autoimmune responses, from joint effusion, rheumatoid arthritis, to the inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's, multiple sclerosis, Guillain-Barré syndrome. I can go on and on and on, and it cleared up everything.
Oh, this is a gift that you have, and I'm going to have to bring you back on another recording, because you have so much to talk about, and we haven't even gotten to your new inventions. But I don't want to go do that now, because I really want to give a good half an hour or hour to that. And Daryl, I think you have overwhelmed us with your goodness, and overwhelmed us with all the solutions and how the thyroid works and the adrenal works. So really, thank you, and I can't wait. I don't know, maybe to go flying or something with you. That would be so much fun. So thank you. Thank you.
Prudence, I would like to say something in return. It was an absolute pleasure. About 20 years ago, I met you and your husband and your children at your clinic in Santa Monica. And I know I tout you as one of the top clinics that I've ever seen in the USA. And I've met some amazing patients through you, because you care about your patients and you dare to be a thinking doctor, right? There are doctors who just treat from what they learned in their books from 10 or 20 years ago. You are a thinking doctor. You wanted to delve in and help and see why these perimenopausal, menopausal women were reacting the way that they were, and you dared to take on technology like I developed and get to the core of what was really problem. Not treat the symptoms, but get to the core and reverse the core with a proper balance of estrogen, progesterone, going to natural. I mean, there's a lot of pioneering stuff that you did that you should be very, very proud of, Dr. Hall.
Thank you. Thank you. And that is a huge compliment coming from you. Thank you, Dr. T. And we'll be putting information about you and how they can reach you in your clinics. And I love people to go to the best. And you certainly are the best. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you from my heart. And you are so generous.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. I thoroughly enjoyed doing this and getting the message out. Thank you.
Me too. Bye-bye.
Bye.